common occurrence of for U.S. state agencies to disperse homeless encampments. What do you think states should do with people who refuse shelter? Oh my God, this is such a hard question. This is such a difficult question because if it was an easy thing, if there was an answer, we wouldn't have a homeless problem. Like there's so many, like in Vancouver, we have that. In certain areas.
Some of the most successful programs that have occurred in the United States. One of them was the entire state of Utah, if I remember correctly. But there is a pretty successful organization that mainly focuses in Southern California, I believe. But one of the main programs has literally just to be, I know this is going to sound weird, give them houses. Just on state dollar, purchase houses, purchase accommodations for these people. We're not talking mansions, but we're not talking a cardboard box on the sidewalk. Actually purchasing these abodes for people, because then all of the other underlying issues can actually be addressed. Because most of the people who are chronically homeless in the United States, and just kind of North America in general, just kind of focusing on those countries, there are other underlying issues, oftentimes addiction or mental illness, or being kicked out of your home due to, family issues with, religion and stuff. That's a huge LGBTQ teens in the United States are a high percentage of individuals that are chronically homeless. But in Utah, they ended up spending $10,000 less, I think, per person that they gave a home when then compared to just trying to take care of them through emergency services. So when emergency services happen for an individual that is chronically homeless, or chronically unhoused, then the emergency services are paid for entirely by the taxpayer dollar. That number can be dramatically reduced by giving individuals a place to live, because then you can address those issues in a way that does not cost the taxpayer. So you look into Utah's system. I'm pretty sure it was Utah. I could be wrong, and it could be Nevada, but I'm pretty sure it was Utah, because I remember being surprised that it was the Mormon state that did it. But some of those programs have been super successful. That's what I would look into.
So, a lot of right-leaning people might say that the problem with that solution is that a lot of people are going to take advantage of the system.
Yeah, totally.
Like you're like, oh, okay, so I could just get a free house if I just don't work, right? What do you respond to? I have a response to that, but what do you respond?
Yeah, I think the general response to that, which is the same thing, because that's kind of the same narrative that's played out for a lot of social programs. And I just think we have so much data historically, sociologically, psychologically speaking, that just shows how BS that is. That is just not the case. The vast majority of people who are in these programs are in the programs because they very much need them and are attempting to do things to better their life through this program. So, that would be my first response.
Even if it is the case for some people, what data shows is that it's enough of not a case for it to be worth it.
Right.
Like you could go find examples of the situations where this person doesn't deserve a house. This person is just taking advantage of the system, right? Yeah, but you cannot just because of those anecdotes go and destroy a model that is there's data that shows that it's working just because of a couple of bad actors, right?
Right.
Also, I just think when it comes to the incentives for people to work and make money, there needs to be and how much people would the lifestyle, how low the lifestyle goes if people don't work, right? There's a certain level that it shouldn't go below.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
We want people to have the incentive to work, right?
Right.
So that incentive should be the more you work, the better lifestyle you have, okay? But we don't want people to be punished below a certain level, after a certain level if they're not working for a couple of reasons, right? And that minimum is that people should have a place to live. Okay, it doesn't matter how much you're working. It doesn't matter if you're leeching or not leeching, or if you most of the people who are not working to the point that they can't even afford is like they're in a position that they are incapable, right? Of working, like they're either handicapped or they're mentally not stable, right? So, but you should have a place to live. You should not go hungry. Okay, you should have access to food. The government needs to make sure that nobody's going hungry. Okay, you have to have access to be able to get skills, either that's education or any other skills like that. That is something that everybody should have access to. It shouldn't be only available to people that have certain amount of money. So that should be, because that is supposed to be the potential way that people could lift them out, right? You should have access to medical care. Yep. That should be, there shouldn't be a minimum for that. You should not be, because you're not being productive. Your access to medical care should not be below a certain amount. And I think beyond these four, we now have a new thing that needs to be a minimum of it. Should be everyone should have access to, and that's internet access. Okay, internet.
That's
access
a real tough thing to get people on board with, though, man. But I agree with you. I think that should be included right there with it. But
I think that should be a right. I think internet access should be a right. Like, because without internet access, there's no way for you to lift yourself up. Okay.
Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting because it goes. What we're seeing is the opposite of what a lot of right-leaning people say. Like, we're thinking like, oh, we need to make sure that people have the threat of homelessness there for them to be productive. But we're actually saying it's the other way around, because once you get to that point, you cannot lift yourself out of that. You basically lose access to the resources and the very minimum amount for you. Like, we basically have put you in a position that even if you have the motivation, you cannot lift yourself out of that situation, right? So, in fact, it's the opposite. We need to make sure that we provide the very basic minimum for people to have the ability to lift themselves up, right?
Yeah.
After that basic needs, you could be like, okay, now if you want a better car, now if you want a bigger house, now if you want to travel,
absolutely,
now if you want to have eat at a better restaurant,
yeah,
now you're gonna have to work harder. Okay,
you just want to set $1,000 cash on fire one night, like, you got to go out and you got to go do some extra for that. But
because unlike what a lot of because unlike what right-leaning people will tell you, most people are not going to be satisfied with the minimum. The vast majority of the people, okay, if you give them the minimum and the tools for them to lift themselves up beyond the minimum, they're going to be like, yeah, I want more, okay? And they're going to work harder for more. There are some people who are going to be like, okay, I have everything, so why should I work?
Comfy. Okay? I don't need to do it.
I'm not going to work. Right. Those are unique people, okay?
Yeah, and they're not less deserving of general health and well-being, right? Because that's who they are, right? They don't deserve to be kicked to the side of the road and stuff, right?
Exactly.
And what was I going to say? Oh, part of this issue too is we need to shift as a global society what we find valuable in terms of productive, right? Like, is somebody who spends all their time cataloging, the history of a city for free, is that person not productive? Is that person not valuable to society? Do we have to all be factory workers? Do we have to all be, insert anything, right? Like, the value of giving people that minimum threshold, right? Like you talked about, you should never go below this living standard. The value of that is it gives people the opportunity to say, what do I find as important, and how can I further that, not only for myself, but for the global society that I live in? And that's how we've gotten some of the most cool freaking things we've ever gotten, right? Is because now we have a little bit more time on our hands, because we're not working 14-hour days to just make enough money to just eat, right? Now we've got time on our hands, and so then we come up with the next cool social media platform. Then we come up with the next great, nonprofit organization. This stuff seems really obvious to me, but clearly there's a huge pushback.
Do you think it might be a better model that if instead of giving them housing, to give them the credit or like the money to get housing?
Potentially.
Or just give them
yeah, potentially. And I think it's not to say that particular model is the one that is just gold star perfect, we'll never come up with anything better. But of the things that we have tried, very similar to like the medical facilities where individuals who are addicted to heroin or meth or anything, they come to these medical facilities and they're allowed to do, these things with medical professionals around. Just both of those scenarios in these two instances are things that have made more progress and have had more benefit and just radically reduced negative consequences compared to every other model we have tried. Doesn't mean that there's not a better one out there, but currently these two seem to be extremely successful.
So this is theoretical, so I don't have any empirical evidence for it, but I'm just wondering, right? I was just wondering if the better model would be, because if the government is providing the housing, okay, then the lack of competition in providing the housing might cause inefficient ways of providing that housing.
Oh, sure.
Right? So I was thinking, like, maybe instead of the government providing the housing, the government was like, hey, you have this much credit specifically for housing. Okay? Like, this is you could go get housing.
And you can spend up to that amount, but you don't necessarily have to, but it has to be for housing. That's an interesting.
For housing, right? And therefore, and then you get the people to go shop for housing. And now, because they're, instead of like being provided with housing, they're shopping for housing. They keep the competition element of the market intact.
Yeah. That is interesting. That is an interesting thought, because it's kind of trying to get at the best sides of both of those angles, where you're not just in this total, free market instance where you can just be screwed over. You have those regulations and you have that support system coming from the government, but at the same time, because you have that competition, you're the homemakers, the people building the homes are still going to be constantly trying to outdo each other and price better.
Reduce the price, because
that's an interesting thought. Yeah, I think there probably are things like that. There are probably aspects to these types of programs that could be instituted that may make it work even better. But again, it's just amazing how successful these types of things have been.
Right. So the fear is, but by the way, this would basically mean that going from the demand side rather than the supply side, like for the government, like okay. So the fear is that maybe the government would not be interested in going from the demand side, because then they don't have like, if you go from the supply side and provide the housing, then you have more agencies, you have more staff, you're getting more pay, like, so there's a lot of people are thinking like maybe the solution is to just give the homeless people money, but the government will like, well, what about my government jobs? Like, what about all these offices and all these agencies that would be justified? What about all the taxpayer money that I could basically be paying myself? So there is like a.
But you could argue that by creating those newer agencies and those various jobs, that is actually providing even more people a tide that rises all boats, right? Because now you have two groups. You now have a group of individuals that weren't being paid these, let's say, higher paying jobs and stuff, benefits.
No, but those jobs would have no. But because if you had paid the homeless people money, right, to go get housing, now because of the extra demand in housing, those jobs would be
go
created
to the housing market.
Would be created in the housing market.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would say I think that's definitely an interesting take on it, and I think that could possibly make that program even better. Yeah, for sure. But currently, the best model that we have is one where essentially they just basically like gave people houses. But yeah, I mean that to me, just right here, just spitballing on it. Yeah, capitalist Armin. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I see. I mean, off the top of my head, that does sound like it could be better.
But again, we don't when it comes to this, like if rationalism tells you one thing and empiricism tells you something else, guess which one you go with? You go with the empiricist. Yeah, right.
How things actually are in the real world.
How things actually are, right? So you could we could sit here and think like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, okay? But if data and research show something else, that's what you go with, right? This is why you shouldn't be ideological about your conclusions. Okay, you go with the data at least.
Right.
Prometheus is saying, Armin, look at our Canadian downtowns. People fear going there because they fear of getting mugged by homeless. I don't know what you're talking about. Only in Vancouver, there's only the East Hastings part that people fear going. I mean, they shouldn't fear going there. Okay, I've been there, but where like the homeless people are harmless. Okay, in fact, if anything, other people are dangerous to the homeless people more than the homeless people being dangerous to other people. Right. So it's just people don't go. There's a part of downtown of Vancouver that people don't go. But let's be honest, it's not because people fear them. They don't harm anybody. It's because people don't like looking at them. It's just not an easy thing to look at. That's the main reason people don't.
There's probably a lot of congestion and traffic in downtown Vancouver like there is in downtown cities in the US, But yeah, more often than not, people that are chronically unhoused, chronically homeless, like they're trying to survive and they're trying to be left alone. So
saying, Armin, did you get mugged? No, we actually went as an atheist group to help them. Like it was really, really cold. So we went there with warm socks for homeless people. And they were very grateful. They were very nice. Like they were it was so nice because even when they wanted more than one socks, they were like, they weren't like, give me, they were very polite. Like, can I have more than one? Like they were so gentle, very, very gentle. So I don't know. I don't think you get mugged by homeless people. I think people who mug you are like
the data just doesn't show out to be stuff like that, honestly.
Prometheus is saying they are drug addicts and they do steal a lot personal experience.
Yeah, and I think the last two words there are everything. It's not to say that hasn't happened, Prometheus, not to say that you didn't experience that. Of course not, right? But just simply to say exactly what Armin and I have said multiple times this episode, which is one personal story, one anecdote does not discount the millions or thousands or,
I mean, I'm sure they do steal, like poverty causes people to steal, right? Yes. But I'm just saying when it comes to safety, it's just they're not a major issue.
And I personally have known people that have been homeless for a period of time or are still currently due to addictions. I do know people like that for sure. But again, when we actually look at the data as a whole, that just doesn't seem to be the majority.
Yeah, and also I don't know much about US, but I heard in San Francisco where you do have a lot of robberies right now and vandalism, right? And you also have a lot of homeless problem, right? These are two different things, though.
Yeah,
the people who are doing all the vandalism and going into the malls or grocery stores and picking up things is not necessarily the homeless people. These are two different groups of people. Yeah.
Right.
Anyways. The addicts are anyways, I don't know. Okay. You can now get the sexiest blasphemous art ever known to mankind for free. Too sexy to show most of it here on YouTube. We draw Muhammad, Hindu goddesses, sexy hijabi art, Jesus, Mother Mary, Japanese god, Greek gods, and much, much more. Click on the link below where it says get our free blasphemous art.